Today I'm going to be looking at this power supply. It's been taken out of my car where it runs a small domestic dehumidifier which keeps the car dry while it's in storage, and it appears to have started failing to start up. A quick measurement of the voltage on the output shows it's delivering about 8 volts, which is well under the 12 it's supposed to be delivering. And if you plug it into the dehumidifier, then it does that sort of chirping thing that switch mode power supplies do when they're attempting to start up into too much of a load. So I've already hit it with a hammer, and that's loosened off the case, which is glued shut. Inside you can see the input side here where the mains comes in, and there's a bit of filtering here, which is quite nice to see in a cheap power supply. The heatsink there on the output is isolated, so it's not ideal having it up here with the main stuff, but it's all right. We've got the switching transistor here, big reservoir capacitor. It all looks fairly all right, decent size transformer along with class Y capacitor. And on the output side we've got a small amount of filtering, some just some reservoir caps really there, and there's another one lurking somewhere. Is it gone? There it is, hiding underneath that wire there. There it is. So I think a first thing to do is just replace those capacitors on the output side and see if it springs to life. And well, I'll just go and do that, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so I've taken out the capacitors. There's a few things we can see here. The small one is 220 microfarads, and the two larger ones are 1000 microfarad. They're only 16 volt, which is a little bit closer than I would like, really, given what they're doing. Then it's a 12 volt power supply. On the plus side, the separation in the power supply is actually pretty good. They've not done the usual stupid thing of putting the opto-isolator at up around the side and ruining the isolation, and they've put a bit of anti-tracking in there as well, so it's not too bad overall. A couple of discharge resistors visible over on the left there to keep the input capacitor from giving you a nasty little shock if you touch the pens when you unplug it. So I'm going to see if I can find some replacements for these capacitors here, and we'll see if it works. There's also this shield which seems to have been put on at a bit of an angle, but rather than disturb the thermal compound, well, thermal pad on the other side, I think I'll just reflow the solder joints underneath that. It's a small double diode package, and that'll let it sit down flat against the board again. Right, well, apologies for the earlier videos, which were recorded in a much lower resolution than I would have preferred, and apparently with the focus wandering about all over the place, but hopefully this will be a little better. So as you can see, I've bodged in a rather large capacitor on this side here. This is 1000 microfarad, 50 volts. I don't know much else about it, it's just one I had lying around. The original 3 capacitors over here have a total of 2220 microfarads. I don't think we need to worry too much about the discrepancy there. I mean, there's a small chance it might make the power supply unstable, but as all it's doing is driving a little dehumidifier, which is essentially a Peltier element and a PC case fan, I think that's probably acceptable, and we'll just see if it works. It just about just fits within the space available inside the casing, so I'm going to just solder that in now, and we'll see if the thing fires up. Some lead-free solder here. It's probably what the thing was made with originally, so I might as well use the same. Might very worn out, I'm afraid, soldering iron tip here. That's atrocious. Let's try again. Come on, float. Doesn't want to flow to that side of the pad. Maybe a little dirty. That's better. This one. Just doesn't want to flow. Something on this board, I think. It's been quite tricky to apply solder to. It's possibly quite thick copper as well, because it seems to be quite sucking the heat away from the soldering iron quite rapidly. Just keep it there for a moment. There we go, that's starting to flow a bit better. A bit of a blobby joint. Let's see if I can just clean that up a little. That's better. Yeah, those two look reasonable. Right, let's just reflow this little TO220 package over here. Just apply a blob of solder on top. Doesn't really want to wet at all. It's not the solder I'm using. This seems to work, well, it might be the solder I'm using. This seems to work for most applications I've tried it on. Right, to squeeze the heatsink and heat up these three blobs together. Then let's get rid of the excess solder by just giving it a little shake. And they look pretty decent. There's plenty of heat in there, so they all cooled after the board had stopped moving there with a little flick. Maybe I shall try and zoom down on them. This camera mount is extremely unsteady, unfortunately. It's just balanced on top of my work light here. Let's just see if I can zoom in on those. And yeah, you can see some reasonably pretty joints there. The middle one doesn't seem to have had the heat flow an awfully long way away from the pin, but it looks alright. And there's the two joints on the capacitor. That one's a little dull, but I think it's fine. You do tend to get slightly less bright joints with lead-free solder. So I'm just going to clip those off. And there we have it. Right, I'm back again. I've now got a suitable mains lead, and I'm going to try plugging this in and see what happens. This is my old voltmeter. I've had it for the best part of about 30 years now, I think. It's a little the worse for wear. The display's cracked. It's got an interesting relationship with decimal places, but you know, it gives you an idea of what's going on still. It's probably not very accurate. Here goes. Ta-da! 12 volts, or 1.2.3.4 volts. Close enough, that'll do. I'm going to unplug that now and let it discharge. I'll wait for that to collapse. Oh dear. Well, it would help if I unplugged the right device, wouldn't it? There we go. It's unplugged now. I don't know what the other thing was that I just unplugged, but I hope it wasn't important. It can't have been the computer because that's on a little uninterruptible power supply, but this thing holds up for a long time. Look at that. There's no load on it, of course, but there we go. Watching it just dissipate. Half a volt. No, 5 volts. 2, 1. Right, and so turn off the voltmeter. Get that out of the way. And disconnect my probes. So now the trick will be to try and shoehorn it back into its housing. I think something else I've learned in this video is that I probably shouldn't wear a coat while I'm doing this stuff, but it is a bit chilly right now. Right, okay. Let's just make sure that's discharged. Screwdriver here. There's that big fat capacitor, the juicy one on the input. There it is. There, okay. Right, finger test. Right, as you can see, the heatsink now sits down flat against the board, which is a slight improvement over the original design, or the original construction, I should say. The design was fine. That's the other half. Let's sit it in its case. Now, I have to say, there's this method of repairing these little brick power supplies. It's all well and good if you're doing it for yourself. You know, you're a hobbyist like me. And you know the risks. You know, obviously this isn't safe. The casing was originally welded shut, where they melt the plastic together, and just popping things out, like the way this wire is wrapped around the top of that inductor, but I suppose it's ultimately harmless. So putting this back together without the ability to ultrasonically weld or microwave weld or whatever it is they do in the factory these days is not recommended, and certainly should not be done if the power supply is going to be used around children or people who don't know anything about electronics. If it opens, there's potentially lethal voltages inside, so don't do that. Right, I'm going to seal that back up again and put it back into service, but in fact, no, I'm not. How about we do a little test and see if it'll actually run. I'm going to adjust that. Will it run the dehumidifier, which is far too big to fit in the frame properly? Let me just focus that back down again. Why can't I access the focus controls? Tap. Well, that seems to work. Right, so there's the dehumidifier. It has a power switch, on-off indicator, and a little full indicator. It's very similar to a unit that's been covered on Big Clive's channel. It's got a drawer that comes out. This one's been in service for a long time, so there's remnants of aluminium and other air deposits that are just collected in it. You can see probably just about inside there, there's the cold side heatsink and the two little switches that control its operation. One to indicate when the drawer is loaded, and the other one to indicate when the water level is full. There's a little float valve there, or float I should say, and a little drain plug. So just pop that back in there, and we'll quickly try this power supply and see if it works before I close it up again. I think I'll probably glue it shut with a bit of tape around it. It's good enough for me, but not safe. So let's bring the low voltage cable and plug that into the back of the dehumidifier, like so. It says it draws 36 watts and 12 volts at 3 amps. Don't know if it actually does, but I wouldn't be surprised. Those little thermoelectric coolers can consume quite a lot of power. I'm going to very gingerly insert the mains into the power supply. Little LEDs on. I don't know if you can see it, it's extremely dim, always has been. And let's see if it will turn on. Oh dear. Well, the LED is on, but it's making a strange whining noise and not apparently doing what it's supposed to do. Let's see if anything else is working. Carefully put that power supply out of the way for a moment. Well, it's recognising when the tray's in and out, which is not especially... Oh, that's bright. Okay. So, has the fan failed? I wonder if the noise is coming from the fan. Right, I'm just going to attempt to remove the other capacitor there. I think it's on that pin. and heat up both pins evenly. Add a little bit of extra solder. Doing this in a jacket is definitely not a good idea. It's far too hot and it's difficult to get at anything. Let's try and remove that again, shall we? There we go, a little capacitor. And we know which way around it goes. The negative faces the bottom there. So 10, hold it where you can see it. I can find where you can see it. I seem to have wandered out of shot horribly. Where is the shot? There we go. So let's focus down on that. There we go. That's 10 microfarad, 50 volts. Color balance is terrible on this. It's supposed to be green. Well, sort of weird, metallic-y sort of green. Anyway, I'm going to see if I've got another one of those, and we'll fit it and see if the power supply behaves any better. So you can see here I've got my little drawer of random capacitors, and these have all been pilfered from various things over years. Some of them are probably 40 years old and never been used for anything. But as is so common with these little power supplies, they quite often have some very small for their rating capacitors, which sort of makes you suspicious of their rating. For example, this is a 10 microfarad. It's even a decent brand. It's an Elmner one. 10 microfarad, 35 volts. And this one from the power supply is 10 microfarad, 50 volts, and it's actually almost exactly the same size. Very slightly. Oopsie. Is it on there? Very slight difference in size between the two of them. Just focus on that. Maybe bring it higher. Come on, focus. Maybe not focus on my filthy fingernails. But, so there you can see there, almost exactly the same sort of size, but the voltage rating is just that bit higher. I don't know if they're really rated that much higher or whether they just hope they don't die. But it can make them quite tricky to find replacements for. So there's 1 microfarad, 50 volts. Nowhere near enough. I think you have to really be in the same order of magnitude. I'm kind of tempted to try a 4.7 microfarad one, but that's only 16 volts. So that's no good either. I think I'm going to be out of luck with my drawer capacitors. I'm going to have to go and see if I can find out what I've done with all my new ones. I do have a tray with a selection of cheap capacitors in it, but I'm not sure where I've put them. I shall have to go and have a look. I do have a sort of tray of capacitors here, which are just rubbish really from all sorts, but I've got some new ones. I just need to find out what I've done with them. Otherwise, I have to buy some.